You lied to me.
I was trying to protect us.
Protect us?
Please lower your voice.
You're carrying my child and you hid it from me for 4 months!
Because your family already tried to destroy me once!
So your solution was to disappear?
You were going to leave me anyway!
That was before I found out you were pregnant! You were really leaving?
The divorce papers were already signed.
Then maybe I made the right choice.
No. Jun-Woo?
No. Because the moment I found out about the baby, you became the most important person in my life.
I don't mean that.
Then why have I spent the last 3 weeks searching every hospital in Lagos for you?
How did you even find me?
You dropped this the night you ran away.
If this story already has your heart pounding, you are in the right place. Welcome to Unopened's AfroK-Stories, where every episode is built to break you open. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and let's go back to where it all began. 3 months earlier, Lagos smelled like rain and desperation. The debt collectors arrived at 11 in the morning. 2 men in white shirts with hard faces and a clipboard that held every number the Suleiman family had borrowed against hope. They stood at the gate of the modest compound in Surulere and spoke loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. And Zainab watched from the parlor window as her mother tried to reason with them in a voice that kept breaking. She was 26 years old, had graduated with honors from the Department of Architecture at the University of Lagos, and in that moment she had exactly 43,000 naira in her account. Not enough. Never enough. She stepped outside before her mother could be humiliated further. "How much?" she said flatly, standing between the men and her mother. "Total. Today." The taller one looked at her like she was a distraction. 3.2 million. And the property assessment has already been filed. Zainab didn't flinch. She had learned very early that flinching cost you everything. "Give me 2 weeks. You had 2 weeks 3 months ago." Her mother touched her arm. "Zainab, go inside. I'm handling it." She didn't look away from the man. 2 weeks. I will have your money." They left, but the promise hung in the air like smoke. She had no idea how she was going to keep it. She found out 4 hours later. In the glass lobby of the Hanwoo Group Tower on Victoria Island. She had come to drop off architectural drawings for a renovation contract, the third freelance job she was running simultaneously. And while she waited for the project manager's assistant to collect the portfolio, she saw him for the first time. Jun-Woo walked through the lobby the way cold weather walks into a room. Tall, immaculately dressed in charcoal gray. Face carved like something expensive and untouchable. The staff parted. Conversations dropped to murmurs. He didn't acknowledge any of it. He simply moved, and the world adjusted around him. She would have forgotten him immediately. She had no patience for men who moved like they owned air. Except that he stopped. He stopped and he looked directly at her. Not with interest. With assessment. Like she was a calculation he was already solving. She looked away first. She had drawings to drop off and a mother to save. She didn't know that by evening, his assistant would be calling her number. The meeting happened in a private conference room on the 31st floor. Jun-Woo sat across from her with a manila folder on the table between them and spoke without preamble. "My grandfather's will requires that the acting chairman of Hanwoo Group be married before assuming full executive control. The transition deadline is 8 months from now. I need a wife. A visible, credible wife who can handle public attention and not create scandal." Zainab stared at him. "I'm an architect." "I know. I had your background checked before you arrived." "You had my background checked. I need someone outside the industry. Someone who has no political or financial alliances with any of the families already positioned against me. You're qualified by disqualification." He pushed the folder toward her. 1 year. Legal contract. You will live in my residence, attend required public engagements, and present as my wife. In return, 500 million naira deposited on the day of signing, and a further 500 on the day of dissolution. The number hit her like cold water. Her mother's debt was 3.2 million. She looked at him and he looked back at her, and neither of them pretended this was anything other than what it was. A transaction between two people who needed something the other could provide. "I have conditions," she said. Something flickered behind his eyes. "Barely. State them." My mother's debt cleared before I move in. Separate accounts. I keep my freelance work. And you don't touch me. The last one hung between them. Agreed, he said. I have one condition of my own. What? Whatever you feel. Whatever you think of me. In public it never shows. You smile. You stand beside me. You make it look real. She almost laughed. Almost. That's not a condition. That's basic acting. For a fraction of a second, so brief she almost missed it, something moved across his face that wasn't coldness. Then we understand each other, he said. She signed that night. The wedding was a media event dressed as a private ceremony. 20 guests, 40 cameras, and a photographer from 3 national publications. Zainab wore ivory and kept her expression serene and practiced the way she had practiced clinical detachment her whole life, by focusing on the end result instead of the moment. The ring was cold when he slid it on. She didn't look at him. Then at the press conference afterward, with cameras still firing and journalists leaning forward with questions about the surprise union, Jun-Woo turned to her without warning and kissed her. It was brief, precise. His hand at the small of her back, his mouth against hers for exactly 3 seconds. She went completely still. When he pulled back, his eyes said nothing. But his lips moved near her ear. Smile. Unless you want them to know this is fake. She smiled. The cameras loved it. The internet loved it more. By midnight, their wedding photo was trending in 4 countries with the caption, "The Heir and the Architect." She hated him comprehensively by the time the car door closed. The Hanwoo family residence sat in Ikoyi behind walls high enough to forget the rest of Lagos existed. Inside it was all cool marble tailored silence and staff who moved like shadows. Zainab was given the east wing bedroom, which was larger than her mother's entire house, and she stood in the center of it that first night feeling the specific loneliness of having everything except what she actually needed. She set up her drafting table by the window, put her architecture books on the shelf, folded her own bedding tightly the way her mother had taught her. Small acts of ownership in a space that did not belong to her. They avoided each other efficiently for the first week. Jun-Woo left early and returned late. She worked from the east wing and ate when the kitchen was quiet. When they had to appear together, a family dinner, a public lunch, they performed seamlessly and retreated without speaking unnecessarily. She told herself this was fine. This was the arrangement. This was exactly what she had agreed to. But on the 9th night she couldn't sleep. She sat in the window alcove at 2 in the morning with her knees pulled to her chest and called the hospital. Her mother's treatment had started. The debt was gone, the medical bills were covered, but the late-night update calls had become a habit she couldn't shake. She kept her voice low and her face turned toward the dark Lagos sky, and she did not hear him. She didn't know he was in the hallway until the call ended. She turned and found him standing in the doorway, not lurking, not intruding, just there, in a dark shirt with the collar open, holding a glass of water like he'd been on his way somewhere else and simply stopped. Their eyes met. He looked at her face, the redness she hadn't managed to hide fast enough, and said nothing. He set the glass of water on the hallway table, pushed it quietly through the doorway toward her, and walked away. She stared at the glass for a long time. She did not say thank you, but she drank it. 3 days later she found his brother. She had taken a wrong turn looking for the library. The residence was enormous and she still got lost. And she pushed open a door at the end of a corridor and found a room that clearly hadn't been touched in years. Neat, preserved still. Schoolbooks on a shelf. A football trophy. And on the desk a tower of letters, hundreds of them, all sealed. All unopened. All addressed in the same handwriting. To Jun-Woo. She stood there too long. Long enough for him to find her. Don't. His voice from the doorway was quiet, but the word had iron in it. She turned. His face was something she hadn't seen before, not cold. Stripped. Like something underneath the glass had been briefly exposed. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. "I got lost." He crossed the room and closed the door behind her, gently, which somehow felt worse than if he'd slammed it. She thought about the letters all week. She thought about them when he was curt at dinner. When he answered calls in 3 languages without pausing. When she caught him staring out the window at nothing, late at night when he didn't know she could see him from the garden path below. She thought, there is a person inside this person. And the letters are from the last one who found him. She started asking his PA carefully placed questions. She put together the shape of it slowly. The younger brother, Jae-won, dead at 19 in a car accident during a rainstorm. Jun-Woo had been driving. He hadn't been drinking, hadn't been reckless. It had simply been rain and a truck and a second that split a family into before and after. But the family had grieved in silence and blamed in silence, and Jun-Woo had carried it. She understood carrying things in silence. She understood it completely. She told him she knew, the night before the Hanwoo charity gala. She found him in the kitchen at an hour when the staff was gone, and she sat across from him and said, "I heard about your brother." He went very still. "I'm not going to tell you I understand what that feels like," she said. "I'm just telling you I know. And I don't think less of you for any part of it." He looked at her for a long time. "Everyone around me either leaves," he finally said, "or dies." She didn't offer comfort that would cheapen it. She simply sat with him in the quiet kitchen, and after a while he poured 2 cups of tea, and they talked about nothing, architecture, Korean summer rain, the sound Legos made at 4 in the morning, until the sky began to lighten. It was the first real night they had ever spent together. She didn't realize until much later that it had permanently altered something between them. The gala itself was a trap neither of them saw coming. Jun-Woo's stepmother, Mrs. Eun-hee-han, was a woman who smiled beautifully and moved like someone always counting the exits. She had opposed Jun-Woo's appointment from the beginning. Her own son Min-jae was positioned as the alternate heir, and she had been watching their marriage with the focused patience of someone waiting for the seam to split. She hired the photographers herself. 3 of them embedded in the gala crowd, tasked with capturing proof that the marriage was performance. What they captured instead was something that confused all of them. Jun-Woo guiding Zainab through a crowd with his hand at her lower back. Bent close to murmur something that made her laugh. Actually laugh, the kind she didn't perform. Zainab fixing his collar in a side corridor because it had come undone. Her fingers quick and familiar. The 2 of them standing at the balcony railing at 10:30. Close enough that the space between them wasn't really space. The photographers sent the images to Eun-hee's phone expecting congratulations. Instead, the images leaked to a media outlet by morning. The Hanwoo heir and his bride. The love story Seoul didn't expect. The comments section ran for pages. People were fascinated by her specifically. The Nigerian architect who had somehow thawed the coldest man in Korean industry. The internet decided they were in love before either of them had decided anything at all. Eun-hee watched the trending articles over breakfast with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She began making different plans. The rain started on the drive back from a rural property consultation, a client of Zainab's in Abeokuta, whose renovation she was managing remotely. Jun-Woo had insisted on driving her himself after her regular driver fell ill, and neither of them had expected the road to flood or the car to hydroplane gently into a ditch on a stretch of road 40 minutes from the nearest town. They were not hurt. The car was not badly damaged. But night was falling, the rain was becoming a downpour, and the single guest house in the nearby village had one available room. Zainab stood in the doorway of the room and looked at the single bed and said nothing. "I'll sleep in the chair," he said. "Don't be ridiculous, you're 6 feet tall. Then I'll sleep on the floor." Jun-Woo. He looked at her. She looked at him. And the thing that had been building since the kitchen at 4 in the morning, since the tea, since the gala balcony, since every silent glance they had allowed themselves, it was in the room with them. It had been in the room with them for weeks. "This isn't what either of us planned," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "And I don't know what happens after." "Neither do I." The rain hammered the windows. The power flickered. And somewhere in the space between what was agreed upon and what was actually true, the last wall between them came down. They didn't speak about it in the morning. But she caught him watching her over coffee with an expression she had no word for. Not cold, not calculated, not even warm in any ordinary sense. Something more private than that. Something that belonged only to the space inside their strange arrangement, in the room where the rain had decided things for them. Then his phone lit up. An anonymous message. A photograph attached. She saw the way his face changed before he turned the screen away from her. He was quiet the entire drive back. Formally quiet. The kind of quiet that meant a wall had been rebuilt in the night, and she hadn't been given the architectural plans. She asked him once. He said it was a work matter. She let it go. She had learned to let certain silences sit. But over the following week, the shift in him was undeniable. He became distant again, not cruel, never cruel, but far. Unreachable. Looking at her sometimes with something that wasn't coldness but hurt, which was somehow harder to navigate. She went back to her freelance work. She stopped waiting for him at dinner. She rebuilt her own walls quietly and efficiently and told herself this was the arrangement. This was always what it was going to be. And then she made the mistake of going through the folder on his office printer, looking for a misfiled renovation estimate, and found the photograph instead. It had been printed out and annotated. The photo was of her, younger, maybe 22, standing with a man outside a hospital, his arm around her shoulder, smiling, the kind of smile she no longer gave easily. The annotation in Jun-Woo's handwriting said, "Who is this man? Sent anonymously. Pre-contract." She stood in his office for a long time, looking at the picture of herself and Emeka who had proposed to her at 22 and been killed by a drunk driver 6 weeks later, before she had answered him, before she had figured out what she was going to say, before she had learned that love and loss could happen simultaneously. She put the photograph back. She walked to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed and she did not cry, because she had learned not to do that after Emeka, and the learning had been the most expensive thing she had ever paid for. 2 days later, Jun-Woo came to find her. He stood in the doorway of her wing and said, "I need to explain something." "I already know," she said. She didn't look up from her drafting table. Silence. "Zainab. It was my fiancé. He died before we could get married. Someone sent you that picture to make you think I was hiding something." She finally looked up. "Were you going to ask me about it, or just go on being cold?" He looked like she had hit him somewhere he hadn't protected. "I'm sorry," he said. And she heard it differently from the way people usually said sorry. Not as a performance, not as a resolution, but as a true and personal accounting. "I know," she said. "I know you are." It was the night after that conversation that she started feeling unwell. Nausea in the early mornings, a bone-deep exhaustion that drafting coffee couldn't touch. She told herself it was stress. She told herself it was the accumulated weight of months of performance and concealment, and feeling too many things she hadn't consented to feel. She bought the test on a Tuesday afternoon from a pharmacy on the mainland, paid cash, left no trace. She sat in the East Wing bathroom with the door locked and read the result twice. And then she sat on the bathroom floor and pressed both hands over her mouth and stayed very still for a very long time. Pregnant. 8 weeks. She did the math. The countryside guest house. The rain. The one night when the walls came down. She sat there until her legs went numb, and then she stood up and washed her face and made a decision. She needed information before she told him anything. She needed to understand the full shape of the territory she was walking into. She began paying attention differently. She noticed which calls Jun-Woo took behind closed doors. She noticed the way Eun-hee watched her at family gatherings, with the particular attention of someone who had already decided what to do, and was only waiting for the right moment. She noticed Min-jae, Eun-hee's son, hovering near his stepbrother's office at late hours. She noticed the family lawyer's visits, which had doubled in the past month. And then, 3 weeks after the positive test, she was coming down the main staircase when she heard them in the study below. Jun-Woo's father, Chairman Byung-soo Han, and Eun-hee. The study door was slightly open. She stopped on the stairs. "The contract year ends in 4 months, Eun-hee said. "I'm aware," the chairman said. "Once it ends, the marriage dissolves. That was always the plan. Jun-Woo may not want. It doesn't matter what Jun-Woo wants. She was a placeholder. Once the board ratifies his position, she becomes unnecessary." A pause. "Get rid of her quietly, cleanly. Make sure she signs whatever keeps her from talking." She heard the chairman's silence, which was neither agreement nor refusal, which meant it was probably both. She walked back up the stairs. She did not make a sound. She sat on the edge of her bed with her hands folded in her lap and thought about her mother, who had taught her that some doors, once they showed you what was on the other side, you could not unknow. She thought about Emeka, who had loved her and died and left her to learn surviving alone. She thought about the babies she didn't know yet, growing in her without permission or planning, in a house that had already decided she was disposable. She began making her own plans. She told herself it was logical. She told herself it was self-preservation. She told herself that Jun-Woo had signed the same contract, had heard the same terms, had always known this was temporary, and that whatever had happened between them in the rain was a complication she needed to contain, not a commitment she could afford to lean on. She told herself all of this in the mornings, when the nausea hit and she gripped the bathroom sink and breathed through it in silence. At night, when she heard him moving through the house, his footsteps that she had learned to identify by tempo, by weight, by what they meant, she told herself nothing. She simply listened. He noticed her withdrawal and misread it as distance, which was exactly what she needed him to do. But Jun-Woo was not, ultimately, a man who could be deceived by his own interpretations for long. He started doing small things. Leaving a book she had mentioned once on her drafting table. Asking about her mother's treatment without prompting. Coming home for dinner on nights she'd stopped expecting him. He told her once, standing at the kitchen counter while she sketched a load-bearing calculation. "This house finally feels alive because of you." She nearly broke completely in that moment. She pressed her pencil harder into the paper and said, "That's the company you hired me to be." He looked at her for a long time. He didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced. She had been hiding the pregnancy vitamins in a locked box in her wardrobe. She had been scheduling her prenatal appointments on mornings when Jun-Woo was in board meetings. She had been paying for them herself from her own account in cash, at a clinic on the mainland where no one knew her name. She should have checked her coat pocket before she left. She didn't notice the pink baby sock, purchased in a moment of disorienting tenderness at a market stall while she was waiting for her prescription, had slipped from her bag until she was already in the car. She told herself it was fine. One sock. It was nothing. He would never notice. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. The call came from the clinic while she was in the study, reviewing renovation plans with a client on a video call. She had listed Jun-Woo's number as the emergency contact. A mistake. A thoughtless administrative reflex she had filled in without considering. And when her phone battery died mid-appointment, the clinic had called him instead. "About your wife's prenatal appointment this Thursday." The call cut out before the sentence finished. She found out when she came downstairs and saw him standing in the center of the living room. He wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything. He was simply standing there with his phone in his hand, and an expression she could not read and had never seen on his face before. "Jun-Woo. How long?" She stopped on the bottom step. "The call cut out," she said. "You don't know. How long, Zainab?" She held his gaze for 3 seconds for 5. Then, 12 weeks. Something passed across his face. Something enormous and layered and moving too fast to name. 12 weeks, he repeated. "I was going to tell you." "When? When were you going to tell me?" His voice was controlled and quiet, and it frightened her more than shouting would have. "When I had a plan," she said. "When I knew what you were going to leave." He said it like something had just clarified, like pieces that had been sitting loose had just locked into place. "The distance. You were planning to leave." She did not answer. "Zainab, your family already decided to get rid of me," she said. "I heard your father and Unhee. I know what the plan is. The contract ends and I disappear quietly and I sign whatever papers they put in front of me." Her voice was steady and she was proud of that. "I wasn't going to let them decide what happened to my child. Our child. That isn't how they see it. I don't care how they see it. Jun-Woo. This is my family. My child. And you were going to disappear without giving me the chance to." "To what?" She came down the last step. "To what exactly? Be angry that I complicated your arrangement? Tell me you'd protect me while your family moved against us? Sign more paperwork that meant nothing?" Her voice broke on the last word just slightly, and she hated herself for it. "I know how this ends. I have always known how this ends." He crossed the room in 4 steps and stood in front of her, and for one moment she was certain he was going to say something that would destroy her completely. Instead he said very quietly, "I'm in love with you." The silence after it was the loudest thing she had ever heard. "Don't," she whispered. "I'm not performing. I have no audience." He spread his hands. There's nothing here except us and whatever this actually is. And what it actually is that I have been in love with you for weeks and I did not know what to do with it. And now you are standing in front of me telling me you were going to carry my child alone across an ocean because you were afraid. And I need you to understand that I am not my family. Her breathing was shaking. She could hear it. You can't promise me. I can promise you I will burn down every plan they have made without my knowledge. His jaw was set. I can promise you that what happened to Jae-won, what happened because people I trusted made decisions without telling me the truth, will never happen again. Not to you. Not to our child. She looked at him. He looked at her. I'm scared, she said. It cost her something enormous to say it. I know, he said. So am I. She left anyway. She left because fear is not always rational and survival is not always logical, and she had spent so many years building the architecture of her own protection that she did not know, in the moment when it counted, how to simply stand still and let someone else share the weight. She left in the early hours of a Thursday with a packed bag and the divorce papers signed on his desk and a single ultrasound photo on her side of the bed. The pink sock. She didn't notice she'd left it in her coat pocket. She didn't notice it had fallen, either on the way down the stairs. She was in the air before he came home. She was in Lagos in her mother's freshly repaired house, before he found the empty wardrobe. He stood in the doorway of her room for a long time. The pregnancy vitamins. The ultrasound. The divorce papers with her signature at the bottom and nothing else. He picked up the ultrasound. He sat on the edge of her bed, the bed she had made herself every morning with military precision, and he sat there until his PA found him 2 hours later, still holding the photograph of a child that was already somewhere else in the world. Then he stood up. Find her, he said. Took him 3 weeks. 3 weeks of hospital records and immigration checks and old contacts and a private investigator who specialized in discretion. He called in every resource he had and spent more on the search than some people earned in a decade and felt nothing about the expense except urgency. He found her. The hospital on the mainland of Lagos, a private maternity clinic. Her name listed under a variant spelling she had thought would buy her time. He was on the next flight. He arrived with a pink baby sock in his pocket, the same one from the staircase. He had kept it in his jacket since the morning he found it, carried it through 3 weeks of desperate searching like a compass, like a promise, like proof of the thing he intended to say when he finally stood in front of her. She was sitting up in a hospital bed when he came through the door. Smaller than he remembered. Tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. Then they went to the door. Then back to him. You lied to me, he said. I was trying to protect us. Protect us. Please lower your voice. You're carrying my child and you hid it from me for 4 months. Because your family already tried to destroy me once. So your solution was to disappear? You were going to leave me anyway. That was before I found out you were pregnant. Silence. You were really leaving? The divorce papers were already signed. Her breathing shook. Then maybe I made the right choice. No. His voice dropped to something private. Something that was only for the two of them. No. Because the moment I found out about the baby, you became the most important person in my life. Tears gathered in her eyes. You don't mean that. Then why have I spent the last 3 weeks searching every hospital in Lagos for you? Silence. How did you even find me? He slowly pulled the pink baby sock from his pocket. You dropped this the night you ran away. She made a sound that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite a laugh. It was something that lived in the space between breaking and relief. He crossed the room and sat in the chair beside her bed and took both her hands in his. His grip was careful, deliberate. I need to tell you something, he said. She looked at him. I confronted my father after I found the ultrasound. He exhaled slowly. He told me something. About your father. Her brow furrowed. My father died when I was 9. I know. He held her gaze. His name was Ibrahim Suleiman. He was a financial consultant. In 1997, when Hanwoo Group was on the edge of collapse, a deal failed, the board was about to liquidate, my grandfather had nothing left. Your father found the exit. He restructured the debt. He negotiated a settlement that saved the entire company. Jun-Woo paused. He never asked for recognition. He signed the consulting fee, finished the work and disappeared. My grandfather promised to honor him, but your father refused any public credit. Zainab was very still. The company exists because of him, Jun-Woo said. Everything we have, every resource, every structure, every inheritance that Eun-hee has spent 20 years positioning her son to claim, exists because your father saved it. She was holding her breath without knowing it. The woman they looked down on, he said quietly, saved them before she was born. The tears that had been gathering finally fell. She didn't wipe them. She let them go. My father knew, Jun-Woo continued. He has known for years. And he said nothing and allowed Eun-hee to treat you as disposable and I. His voice broke on the last syllable. I did not know. I would have told you. I would have. I know, she said. I believe you. He brought her hands up and held them against his chest and she could feel his heartbeat, fast and unguarded in a way she had never had access to before. I have to tell you something else, he said. About J1. She waited. I found documents when I was going through the estate files. Inconsistencies in the accident report. The mechanic who serviced that car, he was on Eun-hee's personal payroll. The room went very quiet. Jun-Woo. I don't have full proof yet, but I will. And the reason it matters now, he looked at her steadily, is that the twins you're carrying are the direct Hanwoo heirs. Primary line. If they're legitimate, they displace Min-jae completely. She hadn't told him about the twins. She felt the air shift between them. The doctor told you, she said. When I arrived. Yes. Twins. His voice hadn't changed when he said it. He had simply absorbed it the way she was beginning to understand he absorbed all enormous things quietly with his whole self. They're going to come after us, she said. Yes. Min-jae. Once they know. I know. So what do we do? He stood. And she watched him take out his phone, dial a number she recognized as his public affairs director, and speak 4 sentences. Arrange a statement. Tomorrow morning. Major outlets. A pause. Tell them the chairman's heir will be making a personal announcement regarding his marriage and family. He ended the call and looked at her. What are you going to say? She said. The truth. All of it. His jaw was set. That you are not my fake wife. That you are the mother of my children. That your bloodline saved this company before either of us was old enough to know what a company was. He paused. And that everything I have, every share, every structure, every inheritance, belongs to you and to our children, legally and publicly, before they can move against us. She stared at him. That will cause a war inside your family. It is already a war. I'm simply choosing my side. Outside the window, Lagos moved in its loud and living way. Traffic and rain and the sound of a city that never fully went to sleep. She could hear it even through the closed glass. The life of the place her father had lived and worked and quietly saved a company in a faraway country without asking for anything in return. She thought about the architecture of things. About what held weight and what gave way. About the structures people built to protect themselves and whether those structures had to be walls or whether they could be something else, something shared. Something that could bear the load of 2 people instead of only 1. Okay, she said. He looked at her. I'm staying, she said. I'm not running again. Something in him settled. Something she had watched stay tense for the entire conversation finally exhaled. He sat back down beside her. Carefully. He reached out and touched her face, just briefly, his thumb along her cheekbone, and she let him. The next morning the statement went out at 9. Zainab Suleiman Han is no longer my contractual wife. She is the mother of my children, the future primary heir of the Hanwoo family trust, and the woman I intend to spend the rest of my life beside. I am making this public so that there is no further ambiguity about where my loyalties stand. The internet exploded. The board went into emergency session. Eun-hee was on the phone with her lawyer within the hour. In the hospital room, Zainab read the statement on Jun-Woo's phone and felt something loosen in her chest. Something she had been holding tightly since the night she had first signed her name on a contract that was supposed to be simple. She handed his phone back. She looked at him, and then her face changed. The color drained from it in a second, wrong, visibly wrong, and she pressed one hand to her side. Something's wrong, she said. He was already reaching for the call button. Already standing. Already calling for the nurse. Jun-Woo. Her voice was thin. Frightened. I'm here, he said. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. He held her hand. He did not let go. The monitors began alarming. Medical staff poured through the door. He stood at the edge of the room, gripping her hand through the controlled chaos, repeating the only thing he knew how to offer. I'm here. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The door closed. The hallway was silent. And outside the Lagos clinic, a black car with no plates had been parked since the early morning, watching the entrance. It was still there. If this episode had you gripping your phone from the first second, that is exactly what Amade's AfroK-Stories is built for. Subscribe right now if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a part. And drop in the comments. Do you trust Jun-Woo? Because part 2 is going to test that completely. See you there.